Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read the S3 3035, The Story of Ships by Jane de Bingham. Chapter 1, Crossing the Water. Come on over, I can swim. Thousands of years ago, there were no ships or boats. If you were born on one side of a river, that's where you stayed. But people dreamed of crossing rivers and seas. People had noticed logs that floated on water, but they didn't do anything with them until a brave man tried to balance on one. To his delight, he could paddle across the river. Steering the log wasn't easy, but falling off was. Some people tried tie logs together to make a raft. Raft could carry goods as well as people. But they were very hard to move along. Help me. What about me? One day, someone had a fantastic idea. Why don't we cut a log in half and hollow it out? He said to his tribe. He thought he was crazy, but they helped anyway. Men used animal horns to hollow out the wood. To make the work easier, they lit a fire in the log to burn out the middle. It was the world's first boat. In some parts of the world, people began to make boats from animal skins. First, they sewed the skins together, then they made a frame from thin pieces of wood. Finally, they stretched the skins over the frame and covered them with tar to keep the water out. At first, people pushed boats along with their hands. It was hard work. They soon realized what they needed was some sort of a paddle. Wooden paddles pushed the boats along faster and helped the people to steer. After paddles came oars. These were much better because they were held in place by loops on each side of the boat. But rowing was exhausting, so the rowers still didn't get very far until a bright rower realized he could use the wind to help. Soon everyone was making sails from animal skins and leaves. Some sails worked better than others. The first great sailors lived on small islands in the South Pacific and sailed between the islands in wooden canoes. Watch out for sharks. Some brave islanders sailed for hundreds of miles. They found their way by watching the position of the sun and stars. Land ahoy! They also knew that birds flew between islands and clouds hovered over land, so they could tell if an island was nearby. Chapter 2, Ships of the Ancient World. The ancient Egyptians lived by the river Nile. They needed boats for fishing and taking food to market. To begin with, they made boats from reeds that grew by the Nile. They tied the dried reeds into bundles and made the bundles into a boat. The only problem was the reeds were not very strong. So they started building stronger, longer boats out of wood. These were strong enough to carry the massive stones used to build the pyramids and temples. The Egyptians also used the boats to trade goods all over the Mediterranean. It took up to 30 men to sail a trading boat. Some rowed and some looked after the sails. Two other sailors guided the boat with the large steering oars. Hey, you up there? ripping the sail. Stop acting like a fool. The ancient Greeks built long, narrow galley ships. They used these for trading and fighting, though not at the same time. Galleys had both sails and oars, but sailors took down the sails before a battle. Galleys were rowed by slaves who sat on benches inside the ship in rows of 2 or 3. The Romans built larger trading and fighting ships too. Roman traders sailed far and wide in search of exotic goods. They brought back silk and spices from Asia and elephants from Africa. Did I mention I don't like heights? Chapter 3. Raiders, traders, and explorers. Around 1,000 years ago, fierce Viking raiders began to attack parts of Europe. They sailed from Scandinavia in long ships that sped through the waves. Which way shall we go today? But the Vikings were explorers too, taking voyages to unknown lands. When they arrived at a new place, some Vikings stayed. Many settled in Greenland, and some even reached North America. While the Vikings were exploring, so were sailors from China. They set off in junks which could travel long distances thanks to their large sail. There are records of Chinese traders and explorers visiting India and Africa. Some may even have reached Australia. Chinese sailors were often a long way from land, too far to use clouds or birds to see where they were. To find the way over the sea, they invented the compass. This had a magnetic needle that pointed north. They also invented the rudder, a piece of wood fixed to the stern or back of a boat. It could move in the water, which made steering much easier. Meanwhile, people in Europe were building strong sailing ships they named cogs. Like the Romans 1,000 years before, they used their cogs for carrying goods and to fight each other. Cogs were fitted with fighting platforms at the front and back of the ship. At first, sailors took them down after each battle. Soon they simply left them up. Sailors weren't just worried about enemy ships. They also feared attack from sea monsters and made up terrible stories about them, although they didn't really exist. Monster ahead. Cogs had a crow's nest on the mast where the lookouts stood. This was very high up, but it gave a good view of what was coming next. Merchants went on long voyages to sell their goods, but life on board was no fun. They had to sleep squashed together. Let me just measure your space. And they were stuck with dry or salted food because fresh food quickly rotted. Many grew sick. When they weren't sick, they were bored. During the long month at sea, there was very little for passengers to do. They played the same games over and over, again just to pass the time. Hurry, I win again. Sailors, on the other hand, didn't have a moment's peace. Sailing was hard and dangerous. Men often fell overboard. They weren't always rescued, but the worst job of all was being a galley slave. Slaves sat inside a stuffy, smelly merchant ship with rats crawling over their toes. Whenever the wind dropped, they rowed and rowed, sometimes for days on end. Chapter 4. great adventures. Merchants bringing goods from the east journeyed overland to the coast of North Africa, where they sailed to Europe. But explorers were convinced there was a quicker way from the east by sea. In 1488, Bartholomew Diaz set out from Portugal and sailed around the tip of Africa. He got halfway to India, but he didn't realize it was there. So he turned back before he reached his goal. 10 years later, the explorer Vasco da Gama also sailed south from Portugal. Like Diaz, Vasco da Gama sailed around Africa. Unlike Diaz, he kept going until he reached land. Da Gama had discovered a new route to the east, India. The sea captain Christopher Columbus had a different plan. While many people thought the world was flat, he was sure it was round. So he decided to sail west instead. He planned to sail around the world until he reached China and India. In 1542, Columbus left Spain with 3 ships. He sailed for over 2 months, but he didn't find the east. After 9 weeks at sea, the lookout shouted, "Land ahoy!" Columbus jumped up and down with excitement. "We have sailed all the way to China," he cried. In fact, they had reached North America. But Columbus had no idea. He was so sure he had found China, he sailed on in search of Japan and reached Cuba. Then he cheerfully sailed back to Spain and told the king and queen he had found a new way to China. "It's right here, sire. I can't believe you found it. Isn't it amazing?" Columbus went back to America several times, but he never knew he had discovered a new continent. Before long, every ruler in Europe wanted to find new land. In 1577, the English Queen Elizabeth sent Francis Drake to South America. "Attack the Spanish ships and take the treasure," she ordered, "and look for new land. I want a country named after me. This land, I like it." Drake set sail from England in his small ship, the Golden Hind. Over the next 3 years, he sailed all the way around the world. It's good to be home. Wait till they see all the gold we have brought. Chapter 5, Pirates and Wars. Soon thousands of ships were sailing with precious cargoes. They were easy targets for pirates. Pirates would attack and steal the treasure. If they liked the look of a ship, they stole it too. Blackbeard, one of the scariest pirates at sea, stuck burning ropes in his beard as he attacked. There were even female pirates such as Mary Read and Anne Barney, who were fierce fighters. Pirate ships were small and good for quick raids, but bigger ships were needed to fight major sea battles. So some countries began to build ships they named men of war. The largest had over 100 guns, 900 men. The only problem was finding enough men to sail them. "You'll do. Come with me." Few people wanted to sail. No wonder. From dawn to dusk, they were hard at work. I must have scrubbed this deck 1,000 times. Ow, I think that burst my eardrum. And any sailor who refused to work was beaten. Ah! To make things worse, the food was disgusting. For months, sailors lived on stale, dry biscuits, salty meat, hard, maggoty cheese. With no fresh fruit or vegetable, many sailors died. But there were more important things to worry about than bad food. While all the ships had used cannons, new ones were built that fired shells. Boom, boom. Wooden ships stood no chance against the new guns. Shipbuilders quickly came up with the answer, protecting their ships with iron plates. The first of these were used in the American Civil War. Soon battleships became even stronger. The devastation built in 1872 had guns set in turrets. They could be turned to fire in any direction. In 1906, the Dreadnought was launched. It had 5-gun turrets and was completely covered in steel. Chapter 6: The Last Days of Sails. It wasn't only warships that were changing. Around 1710, the first steam engine had been invented, and ships powered by steam didn't need the wind or oars. Early steamships had 2 pedals, wheels on the outside, driven by a steam engine. They still had sails, though, just in case the engine broke down. In the 1840s, a new kind of steamship was designed with a propeller at the back. The propeller was turned by a single wheel inside the body of the ship. Most people thought propellers worked better than pedals, but they couldn't prove it, so 2 captains decided to test them both. They held a tug-of-war between 2 ships of about the same size. First, the ships were joined by a strong cable. Then they steamed in opposite directions. The propeller ship won easily. Although steam engines were very powerful, they didn't replace sails at first. Sailing ships were still used for long voyages. In the 1800s, millions of people sailed from their homes in Europe to find a better life in a new country. They left for America, Australia, and New Zealand. Rich passengers had a very comfortable journey. They ate good food and relaxed in lounges. Lovely voyage. Cheers. The poorer passengers had a miserable time. There was so little space, they were all squashed in together. Shush, you'll wake the baby. They had to bring their own food and cook it themselves. And when the weather was bad, they were locked below deck. Look out, Nettie is going to be sick again. That's the last of the food. The fastest sailing ships of all, fastest even then, steamships were clippers. They sped across the ocean, carrying goods that had to be delivered quickly. In 1848, when gold was found in California, clipper captains raced each other to reach it first. And in 1866, the clippers Ariel and Tapping raced from China to London. After 99 days at sea, the Tapping won by just half an hour. The problem was that clippers needed strong winds to sail. They could speed along out at sea, but then the Suez Canal was opened, giving a shortcut to China. Same ships sailed through it easily, but there wasn't enough wind for clippers. Soon no one was using clippers anymore. Passenger sailing ships were not wanted either. Instead, steamship companies built ocean liners. These were vast floating hotels with hundreds of bedrooms, shops, restaurants, and balloons. Some even had a post office. Before a liner set off on a voyage, its crew had to carry masses of supplies on board. Do you think this is enough for 2,000 passengers? Chapter 7: All kinds of ships. Some shipbuilders were more interested in underwater boats. They wanted to build submarine ships that could travel underwater and launch surprise attacks on other ships. The first real submarine was built in 1798. To float on the surface, it had a sail. But when the submarine dived underwater, its sail folded away and it used a propeller to move. Today, a mini subs are used to repair cables on the seabed, and the skiffs explore the deepest ocean. Ships go much faster when they're not pushing through water. So inventors worked on ships to travel above the water. They came up with a hovercraft. These skins over the sea's surface, held up by a cushion of air. Keep it steady. Hovercrafts are especially useful for moving through swamps. Hydrofoils, which speed through the water on undersea wings, are also quicker than ordinary ships. Modern cargo ships don't go as fast as clippers, but they hold much more. Biggest of all are oil tankers. Oil tankers are too large to fit in a port, so they pump oil into tanks in the sea. Some tankers are so vast the crews get around on bikes. But boats today are only used for carrying goods and people. Many are sailed for fun. And just like the clipper captains of 200 years ago, sailors love a race. The end.